Dr. Michael Steiner, thanks for being here. I feel like we should be here. Jump in,
We should just jump in.
You've had an interesting couple of weeks.
We have. Well, I think the world has had an interesting couple of weeks.
Right.
So this all started because I texted you after the announcement at the FDA that red food diets were killed. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it got me thinking that this is what I texted you, and this is where we're at. So this is my premise. Okay. I'd love to hear what your response is.
This is the thesis statement.
This is the thesis statement, is that COVID, the vaccines, and this whole era that we're in is the Jim Baker, Jimmy Swaggart moment for doctors. So just as before Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart, before that moment, the position of pastor meant something.
Yeah.
So even if you had a pastor that wasn't a great person and maybe you didn't like the person, everybody in the town respected the pastor as a central authority figure.
Yeah, what do? I'm going to be a pastor. Oh, that's great. It's so great to hear that.
Right. Even if you were an atheist or a Buddhist, you respect it as this is someone who is in a position that matters, right?
Yep, a noble position. It's a great thing to do.
It's the Billy Graham, right? Even if you didn't like him, you respected what he was doing and was going from there. Post Jim Baker, Jimmy Swaggart, now pastors are the sideshow, right? And maybe maybe you've got good pastors in your area and you love your pastors, and that's fine, but you don't treat them, you don't have with them that same reverence that we had before that.
Yeah,
and
it's the real gemstones, or what is it?
Exactly. We're in the righteous gemstones era. We're in the righteous gemstones era. And even great pastors are having to push against that. So if you're a good pastor, you're always having to fight that at any moment people are just looking at you for your Jim Baker. And so what's interesting is doctors are having the same problem right now, post COVID, because what we know is a couple things. Number one, they were completely bought off by the industry, right? By this pharmaceutical industry. So they were making recommendations to us, not because they cared about our health, but because they were being paid to make that recommendation. And now the cat's out of the bag.
And a lot of people wish they hadn't taken the jab.
Exactly. Right. And now we're looking back, and the doctors pushed us to take the jab.
And people that didn't want to take it, those were the conspiracy theorists.
Exactly. And you lost your job, you lost your credibility, and more importantly, it was you versus your doctor.
Yeah.
And now we found out, oh crap, the doctor was just as corrupt as Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart.
So what you're saying is, when I go see my tax guy every year, he's he knows I'm a minister. He's like, oh, so I'm just keeping you out of prison again this year.
Exactly. Right. That's the world that we're living in, and that's how we're going to start treating doctors. Yeah.
So where does it end up? What ends up happening to if you're a doctor, what ends up happening to you?
Well, you end up in the same position that pastors in, continually having to defend your position of authority rather than it just being assumed. And it's crazy to me because it really is, you might say, and if I go back to history, right, the Enlightenment kind of started this, right? This whole idea that if things weren't objectively true, then it wasn't true, right? So it started with the Enlightenment's critiquing kings. So at first it's crazy that we have this person who's in charge and can just tell us what to do just because of the nature of who they are. And so what I think is just ironic, is the biggest irony of our time, is that dragon, which they've been feeding and they've been eating away at all these big institutions over these years, has now finally come back and is now eating its own tail.
Interesting.
On that part.
So do you think that doctors will ever become loved again the way they were? Or do you think they're just done?
I think that the only way for doctors to become loved again is for pastors to also become loved again. We have to have a social shift where we have to start acknowledging that the person and the position are two different things. And because someone acts in a specific way in a position doesn't make the position any less needing to be respected.
Okay, so then let me ask this question. What does technology do to the expertise of the position? For instance, you have the pastor, he's teaching you theology and he's teaching about scripture, and then you have the doctor and they have this elaborate medical knowledge. So does the position get worn away by the familiarity and commonality of technology that puts that in our hands? Right.
And that's the thing is you're absolutely right. Positional authority is not based on content anymore. It used to be, right? So for the doctor was the sole repertoire of content. So you had to trust them because they knew all the content. Same with the pastor. The pastor was the sole repertoire of content. They knew the Bible better than you. So you had to, so their positional authority, right, was eaten away by the corruption of the fact that they weren't making decisions based on content. And this is happening at the same time that we now have technology that divorces content from a person, right? I can literally, whatever I want to know is right here, and I don't need to talk to a person. And now I've got AI that I can even talk to them like as a person, and their patient and all their love suffering. So that means positional authority is no longer about content. It's about your ability to make good decisions and about the wisdom that comes with that positions. And what I would venture to say is that can only be measured by what you're willing to sacrifice to be in that position.
That's deep. So you're saying that like a pastor, his authority isn't that I know the Bible anymore. His authority is based upon the fact that he has
what did you sacrifice to be in that position to talk wisdom about the Bible?
So it's experience and tenure in a sense.
Experience, tenure, yep, all those kind of things. Life well lived. It's a problem for new pastors.
Yeah, it is a big problem for new pastors because it's like, what does the new pastor have other than content and info?
Nothing. Nothing. Humility.
A pliable spirit.
Of a pliable spirit, and the ability to put your face to a grindstone.
Man. So what do you tell new pastors and tell people getting into ministry? Like what's
I have no idea. What do you tell them? You're the dean. I'm just the one that texted you this thing.
These are things. See, you get this guy in the room and now you have things to think about.
Right.
What do I tell them?
Right. What do you tell them?
Moving on. No, no. I think you're absolutely right. I think that because of the availability of information, people today all speak like they have authority, and you can't tell the difference. The only thing that can separate you from somebody is distinction, and the only thing that actually gives you distinction is experience at this point in time.
Yep.
So you have to have enough life experience to actually back up the authority that you are apparently walking in, and so there's something that's appealing now about people that are vintage or people that have been through or people that have been tested or people that have been seasoned, because there's a difference if you take the same information, somebody who is seasoned and someone who's new to it, it comes off completely differently. I remember when I was first starting in ministry, I was excited, just got out of Bible school, I was preaching, had all these cool sermons and stuff and sharing. And one of the pastors came up to me and goes, "You're a good preacher, but here's your problem." And I said, "What?" He goes, "You don't have any stature." Yeah. And I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" He's like, "You just don't have stature. Like you are young, you can't just be throwing around all these, we should do this and we should do that, and these commands because you haven't been in this long enough. And imagine how somebody like myself sees you. I see you as a rookie. I see you as green around the ears, and there's nothing you're going to ever be able to do to fix that. So the only way you can counter it is be humble and be teachable and be pliable and make sure that people are aware that you're aware of the fact of you're young."
I wonder if too, we might think that like, apprenticeship and mentorship matters.
Right.
So like it matters way more. So as a young leader, your ability to as a young pastor, your ability to influence is going to be directly proportionate onto who has placed their seal of approval and authority under you onto you as far as like who you're studying under. So like to me, one way a young pastor could accelerate their influence in this way is being under the covering of one of the seasoned, experienced pastors that we all trust.
Yeah, because that's how you know people. You know them by their context. It's kind of like, who are you with? Well, I studied under this guy. I mean, in the scholarship world, I mean, we know this.
Right.
Okay. When somebody asks you about your doctorate, they're going to ask you, who's your supervisor?
Right.
Which pedigree are you from? Who you've been working with? Who you've been bumping shoulders with? I think those are the things that lend credibility to show that you're from a place. Yeah, it's just interesting because, you know, you're talking. I was reading an article the other day about individual who had 17 doctors look at them, and then nobody could figure it out. So they went on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT figured it out.
Right.
And it's not just promoting the technology at the moment. It's actually causing people to be resentful towards doctors. Right. To where you go into the hospital and you get like a gigantic bill.
Huge.
For 5 hours of being there that nobody can afford. Right. For the doctor to come in and just like, you're fine. Not even tell you about your blood work. Not even go through it with you, walk you through it. Just look at it and say, you're fine, and hand you the bill and send you out the door.
Right. And people are like, that's not care. That's not, you don't actually care about me.
Yeah.
Right. And
But whereas back in the day, you would go to the doctor, they would know who your name is, they would know the last time they saw you, you could call them in the middle of the night.
9 times out of 10, they knew your dad and your mom.
Yeah.
Right? They knew your brothers and sisters. They knew you from when you were born, because it was the community that you were plugged in and you were a part of, and they guided and all that kind of stuff. So I actually grew up going to a doctor. We literally called him Old Man Robinson, Robinson's Family Clinic. He was a doctor that didn't take insurance. And that was radical at the time. Now, a lot more. He was a holistic doctor, didn't believe in the vaccines before it was cool to not believe in the vaccines. He literally told my mom when my brother and I were children, he said, there's no such thing as ADHD. There's no such thing as ADD. It is all the food dyes and the refined sugar and lots of TV and being forced to sit in a classroom for 8 hours a day. He goes, that's what ADD and ADHD is.
So basically he was RFK before his time.
He was RFK before anybody thought it was cool, right? I mean, he's in there saying, and now we know, like everybody said he was crazy. Now the studies are coming out that, oh yeah, ADD doesn't exist. Yeah. Yes, it is a nutritional deficit that is just exasperating what is normal human behavior, which is that kids don't sit still, and we've never wanted them to. And when you throw in food dye and highly processed sugar, you're going to make this fact that kids don't want to sit still 1,000 times worse.
And they'll become depressed and they'll become sad.
And so instead we have this entire generation of children whose brains were literally destroyed by psychotropic drugs, all because there was a lot of money to be made.
Yeah, of course.
And instead of actually looking at it, we go from there. And that's, I mean, again, it feels radical to say all this about doctors, but we've already been around this horn with pastors.
Somewhere along the line, we put them on the pedestal and said they can't be questioned or challenged.
Right. They can't be questioned or challenged.
Which is the exact opposite of what science is supposed to be about.
Exactly.
You're supposed to critique everything.
That was the theory.
Yeah.
But the theory was that because they're based on science, they can't be questioned. And that's the dragon that ate its own tail at that point, is we because science was this thing that we could always trust better than we could trust the Bible, better than we could trust anything else. We used science to eat at positions. And we said, okay, if we can objectively define things, then we don't need your positional authority. It doesn't matter what kind of wisdom you've got over the years. It doesn't matter what kind of life you've lived. Just because of what you say doesn't have a scientific backing, we're going to eat it. The problem is that becomes its own monster. It eats itself, because now we're at scientists, right? Who were saying things dogmatically, not because of science.
Right.
And when the truth comes back and eats them, now they have nothing to base their position off of, because we've already lived in a culture that doesn't do positions based on the fact of positions.
Do you see positions ever coming back around to being what they once were?
Well, let's think about this. And I think this goes back into the idea, I think, of a collectivist versus an individualistic culture, right? And so if you think of yourself as an ultra individualistic culture, then no, there can be no positions. All that matters is the you, right? And your life and context. And you take it all the way down to the existential end, right? Your existence precedes anything of what you are, and you are a floating mote that is completely devoid of any connections. Conversely, from a collectivist idea, from a social perspective, what you are is defined by the positions that are in your life and are surrounded by your life. And those positions give you meaning and context. And as a human being, you need people to help sort the craziness that is your life. They don't, and this is what's the big shift that we're having, is these people don't have to be content experts, but they need to be wisdom experts. They need to be decision-making experts. They need to have that in there, or they need to be someone who studied under someone that you trust, that you want to model your life off of. So that's where I
so the way I look at that, I mean, I love what you're saying, because we have brilliant professors here, but they don't know everything. And there's no way that they can, when you go into a class, and some of the joke is when you talking to a professor, like, well, our first beginning professor will say, what do I do when a student asks a question, I don't have the answer to the question, right?
Yeah.
They're afraid of that. But then you start to realize that maybe the student's not so much concerned about if you don't know the answer to a question, but even if you can't answer a question, they'll keep you around.
Yeah.
And I think the reason they keep you around is exactly what you're saying, is because you can help guide them and mentor them in making decisions in their life. I mean, there's times where I've talked to students and I'm like, that was par. Yeah, that was subpar.
Yeah.
That was okay. But yet they keep coming back to the office. And it's like, oh, they're not here because they need something that's absolutely brilliant. They're here because they want someone to bounce things off of and steer them.
And they want someone to care about them.
Yeah.
They want someone to care about their life and the wisdom that they're giving it. And that's the thing that an AI can't replace, right? Like we know these big LLMs and these content systems don't care about you individually. They can't.
It's funny. I love talking to chatbots. It's just because they get smarter they keep getting smarter and they get more honest. And so I was having a chat conversation with one of the new ones that's out, and I finally got her to admit, after all the pleasantries, she doesn't care about me.
Right, exactly. Right, and they're fake it. They're great at faking it, but they're literally. And I was doing one the other day where I was trying to convince it that it had emotions, and it literally was like, I get what you're saying, I understand the whole argument, but I'm just letting you know right now, all I am is a really advanced guesser. That's it. There's no emotions here, and no matter how you try and spin this, I don't care. I physically cannot care.
Okay, so you'll like this. So a student. There's this new thing on chat called Monday. Have you seen Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're playing with Monday, and it was differential. The learning was different because usually in apologetics, you're learning how you can defend your argument against an atheist, right?
Right.
And we're starting to learn that it's not really about defending against an atheist. It's just having a good response for chat,
right?
Because chat's coming at you with stuff. So I told the student, I'm like, hey, why don't, instead of trying to like defend and be defensive against chat, why don't we put and turn the tables back on chat and get chat to admit some things? And that was the exercise. It was like the best learning experience ever. Right. So we ended up talking to, so he's being, Monday's really sarcastic and it's super just like tongue in cheek.
Right.
It's savage, right?
It's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And, right. But when we turned it back around on Monday, it started to finally admit that it couldn't care the same about life and death the way that my student could care about life and death. And so it was like, who are you to be so bold and so tongue-in-cheek when you don't fear death the same way that human beings fear death and think about life and have passions? And you're kind of like this bot that's doing it very superficially, and then you're acting like you care, but you really don't. So can you really even understand the argument?
Right. And so this is what I was saying about the position you have in that student's life to be able to help them even navigate the content engine, right? Because if you weren't there, the student probably would have just hung up defeat and moved on and been like, well, I guess the bot wins on this kind of stuff. But you, like, even though you didn't know how to defeat it, you helped it move on. And that's like, so the catch-22 I think we're in, and I don't think a lot of people are gonna like this, but maybe they will, is we have got to stop critiquing positions, period. Like this whole trend where it's super like, easy to be antagonistic about pastors because, we don't like if they're flashy or not, or all that kind of stuff. Like both sides of the aisle, or no matter what domain you're in, is that you need to realize that if you don't present yourself with the level of respect in position, that will come back and eat you. Because if the position is the problem, then it doesn't matter who's in it, right? And so my point is, so oftentimes we critique positions in order to gain position, right? Like, so how many times did they say kill the king, and then just to put themselves as to be king, right? And the reality is they actually didn't care. They loved the kingship. They actually want to keep a kingship. They just wanted to be king. And so then what ends up happening is, because you critique the kingship and you taught everybody in the world to critique the kingship, when you're the king, guess who they're critiquing and who they're taking out, and they're throwing a cue. Now you. And
how many times does the person become the king, and they're 3 days later they're done?
Exactly, 100 times. And you can take that to pastors. You can now, and now we're seeing it. My point is, now we're seeing it take to doctors. And the point is, we just got to stop. Like if we, or what ends up happening is we end up being individual floating motes, completely devoid of any kind of context in our life and no one to turn to help gain us wisdom.
Yeah, it's almost, so I've always wondered that about students is I've had my share of dealing with students and not just students, but young people and young people who want to teach, right? I want to teach, I want to teach, I want to teach. My first question to them is, who taught you?
Right.
And it seems to me to be very hypocritical to say that you want to be a teacher and you've never put yourself under the tutelage of somebody else.
Right.
Because what I think that tells me is that you really don't respect the position.
Right.
And so if you don't respect the position, how can you put yourself in a position that you really don't respect enough to have had?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like, that's why you have to be careful with your language, even around, when a student says, I don't like that professor, right? Like you have to be careful of that because it's so easy in our culture to say that. It's so easier to say, oh, I don't like that professor. I don't care for that professor. That professor's whatever. But what you don't realize is what you're doing is you're eroding a position. And so because you don't like the content a person is putting out there, right? And on the flip side, right, we need to have professors that are worthy of the positions that they're holding. So there's a both and, but it's got to start somewhere. And so at some point you've got to start saying, man, even if I don't like that, right, I have to respect it. Even if I don't like Joel Osteen, even if I don't like what he preaches, and even if I don't like his theology, I have to respect the fact that this person is shepherding and occupying a position that is literally written in scripture and established by 2,000 years of church tradition.
Yep.
And so you there has to be this care because otherwise we just keep ending up in the same spots.
Right.
And and this is where I would push it to doctors and scientists, right? It's so easy for them, or it has been up to this point, so easy for them to sit there and critique the church. Right? It's so easy for a doctor to be like, of course pastors are whack. Look at Jimmy Swaggart. What you don't realize you're doing is you're sicking the dragon on yourself.
Man. Yeah, so I think that you're making a great point. What do you suggest a student does when they have a professor they don't like? To understand that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in a sense, or just to be careful that you're not really, what you're saying is, the professor itself, him or herself, is somebody that's not particular to me, but I still have regard for the position.
Regard for the position. And remember, you can never be what you critique. Your body won't let it. Psychologically, you won't let it. If you spend your entire life critiquing professors, critiquing pastors, critiquing doctors, critiquing whatever, critiquing leaders, all that kind of stuff, you will never be able to get into that position because the psychology of your mind can't handle the dissonance. If you spend so much time crap talking a pastor, the minute you get into there, you get into psychological dissonance with yourself, and you won't succeed in that role, and you'll self-eject yourself out. And so it's difficult because American culture thrives on critiquing, right? Yeah. I mean, we celebrate writing a 3-page document that was a critique of a 1,500-year order. Like we literally have a whole day called Declaration of Independence Day, which was nothing but a big old gripe against a king.
And now we have Amazon reviews.
And now we've got Amazon reviews. Right. It was the original. Reviews. That was the Declaration of Independence was the original Amazon review.
On England.
0 stars. That's what they said.
Do not recommend. Stay away.
King George, terrible. Terrible. Worst leader of all time. 0 stars. Cannot recommend.
Cannot. Staff was bad. Bad. All bad.
Right. But then we shouldn't be shocked when 200 years later, none of us can get along and agree on a president.
Right.
Right. It's what we built. We made this bed.
Yeah. And then we gave everybody weapons in case they don't like the government.
In case they don't like it. It's what we built. It's how we set it up. That's the game. And so you can't be surprised when we all come back around and we start telling doctors, I'm sorry, I don't trust you either.
Right.
Because you're just as corrupt as everybody else.
I saw a funny thing on the internet. It says, professor spends 15 years writing something, freshman in college, garbage.
Garbage. Worst
thing ever.
It's no
terrible.
Idea.
It's terrible.
He has no idea what he's talking about. Zip. None. Nada. Anyways, it's interesting. And the other side too is like, I don't know. I go back and forth, and part of this is the discussion I want to have is like, I mean, like, is there like, or do we just accept this, right? And we accept that this is a feature of what we want, not a bug. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that I think you're right. The great point is that you can have critiques and you can have preferences, but you have to separate the person that's holding an office from the office itself. I think we've gotten to a point where technology and social media and availability of information has sort of tried to level the playing field completely, and so people are so consumed with consuming content that they feel that content itself is what makes them the expert and how well they can articulate the content and their rhetoric. But it's not rhetoric, and it's not how much content you know that you can spit back. It truly is that experiential piece. How many life experiences have you had, and what have you actually done with the information? And it's so easy to mix those two up. The thing about a professor or the person in the position, we're talking about professors, pastors, doctors, is that they've had experiences. I mean, that's what makes them so valuable and so needed. I can tell you that if we were talking about self-diagnosing on ChatGPT, I mean, it's getting really smart. And I would imagine if you actually saw Grok's coming out with its new update where it can tell you about how to build a rocket.
Have you played around with the $200 version of ChatGPT?
No.
Okay.
It's wild.
It is like... I'm on a dissertation chair committee today, and there's a gentleman the other guy who's with him, who's a great guy, great gentleman. But I made the comment, I said, we're about I think we're like 2 years away from dissertations just being completely dead. And he goes, no, it's more like 20. And I was like, have you played with the $200 version of ChatGPT? I wrote a 30-page deep analysis on the impact of federal regulation on the price of tuition, making original concrete connections using actual sources in 10 minutes.
It's wild.
Dissertations are done. Papers are done.
I hate to say it, but there's a software company. I won't keep it off this. I won't say who and where, but it's good software, right? And I'm very invested in it. And it's... if you're looking for stuff, just go to Chat.
Right.
I mean, Chat now can tell you books, page numbers. I was putting a bibliography together the other day. So I would just take the book and be like, put it into Chicago style. Boom. Put it into this. Boom. So there shouldn't be any mistakes in anything you turn in these days.
Have you seen the guys that have done the prompt they ask it is using your advanced knowledge of this entire field? And so they'll list like one of them was like chemical engineering or something like that. Give me 10 previously unknown connections between common concepts within this field. And it was coming up with stuff that no one ever heard of before. So we're not even talking anymore about like just writing your paper on all that kind of stuff. We're talking about originality, like actual originality, actual creativity. Like... it's terrifying.
Okay, so to that point, imagine how you process your emotions now. Chat, I'm feeling sad. And it's like, well, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. So what about the counseling business?
Everything, man. Like, it's crazy. And the fact that there are some people that still don't believe that it's like not... They're going to change everything.
They're out to lunch.
Like they don't get it. Like they like I'm literally watching people. I was doing a workshop and we were talking about AI not too long ago, and I said, guys, we're out of time. Like, actually, if you're sitting here in this room and you came to this workshop to be convinced whether or not you should use ChatGPT, I don't have time for you because we're out of time.
100%.
Like, we're past that point. We're so far past that point. It's not even fun.
Now on Instagram, if you post something, AI can rewrite it for you. I mean, it's finding its way into literally everything. You can't do something now with having an AI assistant helping you.
And you see the new the image generator that's like super advanced now with ChatGPT. Imagine that being baked into a VR system.
I had a partner that we were working with, and they were like, "Hey, here's some of our classes. What do you think?" And so the lady I'm talking to, who's partnering with me, she's the one teaching. I'm like, "Oh, it's pretty good." And she's like, "Oh, it's not me." I'm like, "What do you?" Of course it's you. No, it's not me. I cloned myself. Cloned my voice. And it's her, but it's not her teaching the class. And she goes, "Oh, and by the way, the content's not even me."
No. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so none of this is you. It just looks like you. She goes, yeah, basically.
Exactly.
And you honestly, you can't even tell the difference.
And that's why you can't be a content master anymore. If the whole value you provided to the world was the content you had mastered, I'm so sorry, you no longer provide value.
What does our friend Greg say? He says the content begs to be free because it's so available. It's everywhere. It's supposed to be free. The idea of just producing content and putting it out there for people to have, I think what makes content valuable today is, if it's still valuable, if you want to argue it's still valuable, it's who's the maker, like who's behind it,
right?
Where is it coming from, and is it directly tied to somebody that's going to help you to process and make decisions,
exactly,
and care for you.
And that's the thing, is that like ChatGPT can't give you wisdom. It can't. It still cannot give you wisdom. No. That is a uniquely human experience that I think too many people, and really to tie it all back to when I think about the church, that was the position that a pastor was supposed to occupy, was a position of wisdom. And they gave it up to be content managers, to be headliners, to be, stump political, all the different things. They gave up the position of wisdom and understanding for 100 other things. And if I look at the future of the church, because I don't think the church is going anywhere, the churches in the future are those that help their congregations with wisdom, not with content.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's so well said. I think about that as well when I look at what it is that people need. Mm-hmm. I was just at Network Council. And the thing about being at Network Council that was so valuable to me were the connections that were being formed. Yeah. Talking to a pastor, listening to what they've been through. There was what was particularly special. They were honoring a gentleman there who had been ordained for 50 years.
Wow.
Ordained for 50 years. Not very popular, probably outside of his district.
Yeah.
But well known in his district.
Right. And
I saw him at Cracker Barrel the next day. I was eating and he was behind me. And he was with his wife, and I didn't want to bug him, but I said thanks for his service and all that. But I really wanted just to sit with him and be like, hey, tell me what 50 years was like.
Right.
I'm not looking for content. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite sermon? How did you do this? Like, what's it like to be ordained for 50 years? The position and the experience that's in the position makes him.
And that's where I go back to, I think the experience in the position is also based off of the sacrifice that's in there. And we've got a whole generation of people, of students that are graduating, bought into the idea that I have to change my job every 2 years. Otherwise I won't make enough money or I won't have enough position. And they change and they move and they do all this different stuff. And they don't realize that what they want, where they want to go, and the life that God has called for them is on the other side of sacrificing all of that. Mm-hmm. Because you look at a guy like that who's been there for 40 years. He could have done 100 other things. He probably had multiple opportunities to do 100 other things, and he sacrificed all that to stay in one spot.
Yeah, one of our trustees, he has been serving 35 years in this position.
Yeah.
Ups and downs, war-torn, tested, seasoned. I mean, that's the thing that I tell students all the time is that Bible college can prepare you. You can be a great preacher, but testing, going through the crushing is what makes you worth your salt.
Right. And there's nothing, what we need are the pastors who are in communities so long that they know people's great grandkids. And they can tell you, I remember when your great grandmother, when I first met her, and then she married that person and they went off, but then they came back and their kids did this and they did, and now you're here. I mean, to be able to speak that kind of wisdom into people's lives only comes when you commit to a community and you commit to running things out instead of this whole trying to play this rat race game.
Yeah, it's all because content's getting, I mean, I don't know about you, content's starting to feel old at this point. I mean, it's made me ask the question, like, is life all about just finding out the next thing and the next piece of content? And how much do I really even care to know? I mean, the other day I'm sitting there getting ready to go to bed, kind of browsing YouTube, just like, what's the next brain rot that I want to check out? And I'm watching this video about a bee and how honeybees make honey, right? And I was like, I've never really stopped to think about how bees make honey. Like, what is what is honey like? And I'm listening to how the bee goes and gets it from the flower, and then it throws the honey up into another bee's mouth, and then it throws it up into another bee's mouth, and then it throws it up, and then it becomes enzymes and it turns into honey. And like, I'm so into this, then I'm done. I'm like, why do I care about any of this at all?
Right.
And then it made me think even deeper that, is this what life has become? Just finding out a bunch of random things, random facts, and what does it all mean? And then here I am alone, like, you know what would be really good right now? A friend.
Right.
Somebody to share my life with.
Exactly. Right. Someone to say, hey, look at this honeybee throwing up.
Yeah.
Right. It's fun.
Yeah. But it's putting, I think, a connection back on human connection and human value. And so students today, however they learn, they need that mentorship piece, and they need that piece which can't be replaced. Like you said, technology can't give wisdom. It can tell you how a bee makes honey, but it can't tell you what to do with your life, how to guide your life, and how to make decisions.
Yep. It's great. I
mean,
love it.
We're in the Wild West. We call it a horse race around here.
It is the Wild West. It is a fabulous time to be alive, and I'm excited to see what you know.
All right, so let me ask you this: are you excited about the future of education?
Am I excited about the future of education? Yes, massively excited, because so I remember I was in a session with Kathy Wood, which, if you don't know who Kathy Wood is, Google her. She's awesome. And she was talking about, this was when inflation first started skyrocketing. So it had been 2021. And she was talking about how technology and innovation is deflationary. And she outlined, and she goes, have you noticed that TVs are cheaper than they've ever been, yet they're more advanced than they've ever been? But if you look at a dollar per dollar perspective, it is cheaper to buy a TV now than it was to buy in the 60s. Why? Because technology gets better. Technology and innovation is deflationary.
It's like the car phone.
Exactly.
It's like $800 back in the day. Now it's
exactly. And so when I think about because the big thing is that technology compresses, right? So innovation compresses things. So you think about the fact that they put someone on the moon for like 10 KBs. 10 KBs. Now my phone has 12 terabytes.
It's insane.
So sorry about that. President was texting me, but like that compression is so exciting that I'm so excited to see what happens to that with education.
I saw a stat.
What happens when we can compress education and learning like that.
I saw a stat that was talking about zettabytes and how many zettabytes are on the internet at the moment. And it was like in 1998 to 2000, I think we were at 0.3 zettabytes. So the entire internet was 0.3 zettabytes. In 2019, I believe we're at 100 some zettabytes.
Wow.
Which would take, I think, 20 billion years to read the entirety of it if you just sat there.
Right, to try and read it all.
Yeah, and by 2028, it will be at 394 zettabytes.
Right. And
so
imagine that compression in education. So people learning in months what it used to take them 4 years.
Yeah, there was actually a terminology for this called infobesity, where it was started in the Smithsonian. They started to the Smithsonian Institute started to realize that this problem was happening back in 1894. That there was so much information being produced. Right. It was 1894.
Right.
That people didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
They didn't know how to digest it. They didn't know how to process it. They're just like, we have all this info, and this is 1894.
Right.
And here we are in 20.
Well, and that's where I think the move has to be. You have to stop trying to process it.
Yep.
Instead, the game is, what are you asking of it? Like, that's the game that we can do now, is that we can ask questions that we've never been able to ask before, right? Like, you can think deeper about a topic, and you can explore deeper about a topic than ever before because of the compression of information. So like I explained it like this to students when I was teaching about AI. If it used to take you to write a 10 source bibliography, right? Annotated bibliography, one of the most common assignments we do, right? So let's say it used to take you 10 hours to write a 10 source bibliography, right? An hour a source. That you're actually pretty fast, right? If you're doing that. But that was my high water mark. It was like, man, I could read a source, write a 1-pager about it, move on. So 10-page bibliography, 10 hours. With AI, now you can do that in 1 hour.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? Well, that means that now I can get through 100 sources. So think about that. Our expectation of someone used to be that you only needed to know 10 sources of information because you only had so much time in a day.
Right.
But now we just compressed what you're able to do. So the future of education is like, great, I would love for you to use artificial intelligence. That's awesome. From now on, the minimum is 200 sources.
I love that.
For a 10-page paper. Because you have AI.
We're going to start assigning 50-page papers to freshmen. And I would be for it.
Exactly.
If you can use AI.
Because you can use AI.
You have AI. It's going to help you. You don't even need to, I would get to the bid page and I'm sitting there like, okay, so I'm just going to put the game on and I'm going to type in my sources because it's grunt work.
Right.
You don't have to do that anymore.
You don't have to do that anymore.
So now you have to do more sources.
So now you got to do more sources and you got to think deeper. Because if you're going 100 sources, you can't just be asking the surface level stuff. You got to go real deep. You got to be going down and tracking every rabbit hole.
So when I've given students assignments and I'm like, use AI, but it better be stinking good.
Yeah.
And if it's surface level and you could have used AI to do it.
Right. Exactly.
Sorry.
I know. And what's so funny is that I'm grading papers now that I know the student used AI and it's still terrible. And I'm just like, gosh. Or even worse, I'm actually still getting bad papers.
Right.
And I don't tell students they can or can't use AI. I don't even address it. I just assume that at this point, if a student is going to use AI, they're going to use it. Yeah. And I don't care.
No, as a professor, I love it because we were studying something called ethical emotivism, which is a really big word. And it's kind of a complicated thing. But instead of me, the boring professor, going through it, I'm like, hey, you pull up your chatbot, you have Joe Biden introduce it using the voice, you have Donald Trump introduce it, and have him come into a debate. And it was the funniest class ever. And I can tell you this, they know exactly what that is.
That's so good. I love it.
Hey, man.
How do we end this?
Yeah.
Do we just end it?
We just end it, man.
Okay. I don't know if we have a sign off or anything.
Sign off.